Hi everyone, welcome back to First Principles. Today we're going to be talking about currencies and we've got Adam with us. How are you doing, Adam?
Hey, how's it going, Saagar?
Very well, thank you.
Thanks for having me on.
For the context of this episode, could you introduce yourself to our audiences, please?
Sure. My name's Adam Braus, and I do a number of different things, but I have a startup that's creating the first Hayekian currency, and that's what I hope we can talk a little bit about today. It's kind of a
Perfect.
new and alternative view on currency that hopefully it's the first, probably the first any of your audience has ever heard of it. So it's just an exciting thing, and we can kind of kick the tires and ask questions and learn about it.
Awesome. Okay, so here's what I want to structure it like this, right? So first we'll get into what the basics of a currency are, and I'll give you what my priors are. And then afterwards, just touching upon all golds, crypto, Bitcoin, whatever, and then your concept of hiking currencies, we can really delve
Yeah,
into that. All right.
let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay. Maybe 15 years ago when I was at university, and don't quote me on this, maybe like, I don't know, 2010, I heard Max Kaiser on RT talking about Aristotle's definition of money is. And then years later, I read the book called Honest Money, and then of course Bitcoin Standard. So I have a decent understanding of what sound money is, but then we are specifically talking about currency. So let me just jump right in. What, according to you, is a currency?
Well, I mean, we were talking before too a little bit about Hayek, F.A. Hayek. I mean, these are Hayekian currencies, so we're going to be talking about Hayek a lot.
Hmm,
And I think his definition of money is really interesting and kind of provocative, which is that money is actually we treat it like a noun, but it's actually an adjective.
hmm,
So, things can be more and less money.
hmm,
By that definition, it would just be things that are saleable at a consistent price in the market. So something that's extremely saleable at any given time
hmm.
in the market is money, and people call that money.
Right.
Things that are not saleable at certain times or the prices change a lot, so it's not like able to be sold easily throughout the day and throughout every minute of the every single person in the market wants to buy it and sell it.
Hmm.
Then it will stop being money.
Okay.
So yeah.
So when you say saleable, you mean like heavy liquidity. Everybody wants that. And
Yeah,
they'll,
everybody wants it. Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
So
Liquidity. Right, right. And the more liquid something is, really, the more money it is.
right,
If I have like a bunch of I don't know, clay. I don't know. I'm an art student and I have a bunch of clay. Very few people want to buy that from me. It's not saleable.
hmm,
But if I have like ingots of gold, probably anybody will take that off my hands, if
right,
I'm willing to trade it because they want it.
right. So apart from the shiny characteristics of gold and the collectability of it, like because you
Yeah.
like gold, what else? I'm assuming there's a scarcity element because it can hold value across time and space. Is that also a reason?
Right. So then there are features of what makes something saleable all the time,
Hmm,
right? What makes something very, very money if we use it in that adjectival way.
hmm,
And one of them is that its value is preserved over time.
hmm,
One of it is that it can be divisible. So I mean that's an obvious kind of mechanical thing, right? If you in many in South Sudan still to this day, cows are currency, and in many parts of the world, cows were currency for a long time.
yeah,
And cows are not very divisible,
hmm,
right? You can't divide a cow.
yeah,
You can have multiple cows, but you can't, in a herd of cows, but you can't get smaller than one.
yeah,
So that makes it less saleable because you can't give change essentially when you're trying to buy a pack of gum with your bovine currency. So yeah, if you want to make a currency better, you can improve its features
hmm,
to then be a better currency than another currency.
right,
So a currency that's more liquid, more saleable, better divisible, more in demand, also permanent. A
hmm,
cow will die, right? A cow also needs to be fed, right? Whereas gold just sits there; it doesn't rust. It's easily divisible. Uh, Current gold has the problem of you can degrade it and people don't notice if you
hmm,
go very gradually.
hmm,
So that has that problem. And then recently we have electronic currencies. I mean, even people often forget that actually in the 70s, the United States dollar became essentially electronic currency already. I mean, 99% of money is just electronic ones and zeros.
right,
It's not paper or bonds or. Um, and so we do have an electronic currency already, and that makes it very divisible, right? Because you can use decimal places,
yeah,
and it makes it very fast to be able to send it. But fundamentally, yeah. there's a lot of things that can make a money. Hayek hones in on four things, and this
Mm,
is this is the classic stuff that everyone hones in on, right? So the medium of so money is a medium of exchange, a means of deferred payments. Like, if I loan money to you, you can pay me back, and I
mm.
can feel comfortable with that. It's a unit of account. So I write down in my accounting books, I have to write down on my ledgers some denomination,
Yeah.
right? And so a money is a good unit of account, and then it's also means of exchange. Did I already say that one?
I think that
Fourth
was the
one.
first one.
Okay, means of exchange,
Store
means
of
of
value?
deference payment, store of value. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is the fourth one. So then, yeah, over time, you could bury it in your backyard, and 10 years later, you could dig it out and you'd get roughly the same or maybe even more than when you buried it, right? So that's kind of a good sign of money. So if you improve those characteristics of money, then you actually make a better money. And that's kind of the goal with new currencies is, well, how can we use technology? In the case of cryptocurrencies, use cryptographic technology and the internet. In the case of Hayekian currencies, really just change the sort of the structure
Mm,
of the way the currency operates. It's not even really a technological advancement, and offer a currency that in one or multiple of those categories, those four categories, it actually is better than maybe a national fiat, or better than a cryptocurrency, or better than cows, hopefully better than cows. It's pretty easy to be better than cows.
yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. A few comments and a few questions, clarifying questions before we jump in further. Okay. There is some money which is essentially ledger money as well, right? I think in the Polynesian islands they had something with rye stones. So that's like
Oh,
everybody
yeah,
knows
yeah.
that, yeah. And then of course there is the whole concept of bearer assets. So like gold would be a bearer asset. My issue with
Yeah,
that is someone could just come and with force take away all the gold. So we wanted to
right,
have some kind of a characteristic of, I don't know, inherent privacy in it, in which it's there, but it's not really there. So that
right,
that makes it fun. And then, of
right,
course, the scarcity angle. It will not remain a good store of value if you can produce a lot of it.
right,
What are your
right.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, these are all, important features, right, of any kind of modern currency. If you start
Hmm.
thinking about, well, what could we use to be a good form of money? If you said, well, let's use, hydrogen atoms, you can't make any more of those. Yeah, but they're in hyperabundance,
Yeah.
and how are you going to keep a ledger of them? And, so we use, so currently most countries, most people, most everywhere use national fiat currencies
Hmm.
produced by central banks. And those central banks limit the supply through their regulation of the banking industry,
Hmm.
and regulation of counterfeiting, keep the amount of money limited
Yeah.
to some extent. But they produce a lot of it, right? They kind of make as much as they want,
Yeah.
and through democratic and sort of pseudo democratic checks and balances, we sort of hope that our central banks are, operating in the best interests of whatever the country, history, human species, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there are critiques of how those technocrats are kind of operating, and whether it's good or bad. But that's where we are today.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be a problem for me if I like learned basic maths. I'm trying to measure something with a ruler, and then the definition of a meter kept changing. So that's my gripe with, the denominator keeps increasing. But okay,
Yeah.
can you differentiate for the purposes of this conversation between wealth and money, and then money and currency?
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, I think I can try to do a little mind reading. I mean, I'm sure different people would answer this differently,
Hmm.
but I'll try to read your mind a little bit and say, well, wealth is probably like actual assets that you have.
Hmm.
So like if I own $50 billion worth of Amazon stock, that's not money. I don't have money. I have Amazon stock. That's
Hmm.
like a real asset. Or if I have 10 houses, or if I have, whatever,
Hmm.
50 bushels of grain, I don't know.
Yeah,
And
whatever
then
you want,
money, yeah,
basically.
and then
Yeah.
money would just be um any the dollar denomination, the monetary denomination of that wealth. So if I have
Right.
$50 billion worth of, right, of stock, that's different than 50 million shekel, Israeli shekels of that, or whatever. So money is just this kind of, way that we think about the value of a real asset, even though that real asset has its own sort of intangible exchange value that
Yeah. Yeah.
it'll command in the marketplace. But then currency would be like, you actually have a balance on your credit card, balance on your checking account, or you have some cash in your wallet that would be like currency. You have this ready liquid money that you're able to sort of send and spend.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's right.
Yeah.
Man, I feel like I'm getting quizzed. This is a good quiz though. I know I like getting our terms very clear. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Well, okay. So in that same spirit, then, I would call like basically count oxygen as wealth as well, because it's very important for me
Sure.
to live,
Oh
but it
my
doesn't
God.
really have a dollar value unless, of course, you are hiking somewhere in a low oxygen area. So it also has, again, there are certain undertones of scarcity there. So things that somebody values, which will take effort to produce, that would be kind of translated into money. So money
Right.
is like, okay, all right, okay.
I mean, anything that's divisible. So, for example, there's cool examples in history, even in modernity. Like, so if you look at Eastern Berlin,
Hmm,
where it was communist, most transactions on the black market. So, when you do communism and you do price controls and you limit all economic freedom,
hmm.
you get huge black markets emerge
Yeah,
for everything because
yeah.
everything goes underground because you can get more value from the underground market than the formal market.
Hmm,
So, in East Berlin, money was cigarettes and bottles of whiskey.
yeah,
And so bottles of whiskey were like you couldn't really divide them up. So you had a bunch of bottles of whiskey that you saved,
yeah.
and then you do big transactions with bottles of whiskey. And cigarettes, you could give one cigarette, 10 cigarettes, a pack of cigarettes, a carton of cigarettes. So that was
Right,
for smaller transactions.
right.
And so yeah, money is really any and cigarettes don't really degrade, whiskey doesn't really degrade
Hmm.
over years, so it's a pretty good form of currency, pretty good form of money.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Unless you
but
consume it, then that becomes a
well,
problem.
you smoke cigarettes, it's almost like you're buying the it's kind of like you're buying the cigarettes, right?
Yeah,
But yeah, you're kind of it's probably there's a premium on it because it is money. It's serving that sort of that good, it's serving the use case of being money that adds some value to it. So
yeah.
yeah, to smoke it would be silly. I always wonder if in India, when they said religiously don't kill cows,
Hmm.
I always wondered if there wasn't a monetary reason for that. Like it was almost a monetary policy. Like if cows, I don't know if cows were money in India at any time, but if cows became money, then you'd be like, don't kill cows. That
Yeah,
almost be like a inflationary monetary policy,
yeah.
right? I
Maybe.
don't know if that's the case, but it always struck me as a possibility.
Yeah, it's definitely wealth, especially in the more agrarian times, because ghee is made of cows, and then of course milk comes out of cows, and it's very important for
Right,
nutrition.
right.
So if you kill it for lard and beef, that
Right.
might be a problem.
And also working in the field to
Yes,
plow, pull. Yeah. So
yes.
I wonder if it wasn't a sort of, some of these religious beliefs, like I know, the raising of pigs
Yeah.
for Jewish and Muslim people, you find prohibitions on pig raising in
Hmm.
desert religions.
Yeah,
Well, pigs take a ton of water to raise, and
yeah,
then only the rich get to eat it. So really, you're gonna kind of starve out some poor people of water if you raise pigs. So,
yeah.
anyways, there might be a kind of some religious sort of stuff surrounding that. I don't know. But
Yeah.
certainly now our religion is mostly based on money. I think the religion of capitalism making money.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But I can tell you a little bit. So I'll just say that Hayek wrote this book called The Denationalization of Money
Hmm.
in um in 1972, I think. And so right after 1971, which
Hmm.
your audience is hopefully familiar with. WTF happened in 1971, the,
Yeah.
the website. If you're not, go and look at what WTF happened in 1971. But yeah, in 72, he wrote this book that just was like kind of thumbing his nose at Milton Friedman. So Milton Friedman wrote this paper, and in it he said no one could ever launch a new currency except for a government, because if you did, the person who launched it would immediately have the incentive that would be like an overwhelming incentive to just hyperinflate the currency and just print
Hmm.
money and give it to themselves and kind of run away, kind of like a scam artist, right? Like kind of a shit coin or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And Hayek was like, that is Milton Friedman is off his, that's so not true. I'm going to write a whole book explaining how you could easily launch a new money and how it wouldn't do that. And so he
Right.
wrote this book called The Denationalization of Money. It's only 90 pages long. It's free. There's links to it, PDF links to it all around the web. The internet is not, you're not pirating it. It's a free open source book that anyone can read.
Hmm.
And I recommend people to read. It's a lovely read. Hayek is sort of one of the, some people consider him one of the greatest economists ever to live. I certainly think he's an inspiration. So yeah, I read that book a long time ago in college, when I was reading a lot of foundational economics texts, and I was like, huh, why doesn't someone try this,
Hmm.
and that's as far as I got with it then. I was just like, seems like someone should try this. And
Yeah.
honestly, today my opinion's the same. It's like it seems like someone should try this. That's I'm not really like a virulent, I don't know, fanatic or something. I'm more just like, huh, what if we could just make money like better?
Yeah.
And here's this Nobel Prize winning, some people consider the greatest economist to ever live, suggesting it,
Yeah.
writing out a manual for how to do it. Why don't we try it?
Hmm.
So that's
Okay.
kind of where I'm at. So in the past few years, I'm a computer scientist, so I built out iPhone app, Android app, and website to make it work and to do it, and it's all set up to work. And so yeah, it's more about kind of getting people interested in the concept and excited about it. And if enough people get excited about it, we can launch it basically.
Okay. So let's start with what is fiat money first, and then we'll talk about the denationalization of it.
Okay, yeah,
What,
this
what's
is
what,
great.
what's fiat?
Everyone here is getting this is like a great education in
Yeah.
money. So fiat is the Latin word that means make it so. Make it
Mm,
so, number one, make it
mm,
so. It just means to do or to make. Facio is to do or to make. And so fiat is do it, make it. And so what it means is money that is money because somebody said that it was, basically.
okay.
It's the Humpty Dumpty form of money. I make it so. And so generally, when you say it, though, you just mean that a national government has declared a certain bond or a certain paper to be money.
Money.
That's fiat money. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And usually now it's all central banks: the European Central Bank, the Central Bank of Japan, the Central Bank of England, or the Bank of England. The Federal Reserve is the Central Bank of America.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. And then apart from the central bank, of course, when a bank when it gives out loans, it's also creating some money. Is that my correct understanding?
Yeah, so that's called the multiplier effect,
Right.
right? So because banks engage in what is called fractional reserve banking, that's what
Right.
all our banks do, and that means if you put in $100 into the bank, they actually can lend out usually up to $80 of that. They can lend out to
Hmm.
someone else. So that means you are looking at your balance and saying, "I have $100," but someone else is looking at their balance and saying, "I just got an $80 loan from the bank, so I have $80." So you
Hmm.
just increase the money supply. It's not a very significant amount though. Like people talk about like theoretically it could like multiply the amount of currency by a lot, but empirical economists have measured this and it
Hmm.
never really does more than double the amount of money. And anyways, the quantity of money as a whole, very complex topic. Is like how much money is in the economy is like an almost unanswerable
Hmm.
question.
Hmm. Hmm.
Theoretically, it gets bigger and it gets smaller, but it's almost impossible to say exactly how much there is at any one time, and that's for various very complex reasons that we don't have to get into.
Okay. So
Yeah.
what's your work then when it comes to Hayekian currencies? Where do you come in and what's your project?
Yeah, so the project is called Numi, paywithnumi.com. You
Hmm.
can check out the website and you can subscribe for kind of updates as we hopefully can launch with more excitement. That's basically what we need is we need a group of people who
Hmm.
think that this is like me, they think this is interesting. We should
Hmm.
try this. Or they're more excited and think we definitely should do this, right? And so your audience is welcome to be part of that. And basically, it works. The way the application works is it follows exactly the instructions that Hayek gives for how to build a Hayekian currency, and it functions like a Venmo app.
Hmm.
Kind of, you can sign up, and then you can attach your bank account, and then you can buy Numi, and you can hold it in your wallet in Numi, and then you can send it to other Numi wallets for free, no transaction costs, and
Yeah.
instantaneous free transactions. And yeah, so the way it's different from like a Venmo is denominated in US dollars, Numi is denominated in Numi.
Right.
And Numi is tied to the CPI index, the consumer price index. So as inflation goes up, the Numi just stays level with
Hmm.
with the actual purchasing power that you had when you first bought some Numis. And this is
Right.
exactly what Hayek suggests to do. And the way that you preserve that inflation, that zero inflation value, is you do exactly as Hayek suggested, which is you maintain what is called 100% asset reserve target.
Right.
So that means that as people are buying Numi, you take a you take 100% of the money they're giving you, and you buy real assets, and those assets then defeat inflation 95% of the time.
Hmm.
And that's enough. That's enough to have it be essentially in practice 100% of the time, even though, there can be divergence between assets and inflation. Generally, assets beat inflation. And over the long run, they completely destroy inflation. I mean, asset growth is many times larger than inflation over the long run.
Right.
So yeah, you basically are doing what the Federal Reserve does not do, which is the Federal Reserve does not keep a valuable reserve to protect the value of US dollars.
Hmm.
Instead, they just keep, I mean, if you look at the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve, it's dog crap. I mean, it's toxic mortgage-backed securities.
Hmm.
Well, most of it is now toxic mortgage-backed securities. So paper that no one wants, unsaleable
Hmm.
mortgage-backed securities, basically. And then it has a bunch of treasury bonds, which are basically like funny money because they only preserve their value because the Federal Reserve is willing to print money to buy them.
Right.
So that's all just sort of funny money, sort of circus monopoly money. And then it has a bunch of gold. Now the gold has some real value, and historically, gold is kind of always going to have value to human beings. But that's only like, not, I don't know, 2-5% of the reserve is gold, and the rest is just basically funny money,
Right.
treasury bonds, and more toxic mortgage-backed securities. So they're not doing that, and then that leads to the dollar being quite weak, and having these cascading inflationary moments over the past 50 years, losing 300% of its value over 50 years. That's
Hmm.
not a great track record for a currency. um, but by holding valuable assets in reserve at 100% of it. By the way, the Federal Reserve only holds about like a 60% asset reserve. It doesn't hold 100%
Right.
because it doesn't care. It doesn't care. It's not trying to provide a sound currency. It's just kind of the good faith and credit of the United States government supports it, so they can kind of do whatever they want.
Hmm.
But with Numi and with all Hayekian currencies, people should hold 100% asset reserve target. And that will protect the currency from inflation and make an inflation-free currency. It may even provide additional benefits above inflation. So it might be that you get points on your thing as you spend, you get points, and then you can redeem those points. Or that, so there might be other ways where you could kind of get even more value than
Hmm.
even being inflation proof. But we'll see. That'll be experimental when it's more like launched and running, um, to see what kind of additional benefits can be given out to the users.
Okay. A few
Yeah.
questions I'll have to go back and forth because a lot of things are running in my mind.
Yeah.
So the
Sorry,
first,
I went long.
no, no, no. Okay. So if the Federal Reserve or any central bank wants to take the term fiat seriously, why do they need to back it up with anything? Because it's essentially a command, fiat. So why back up with
Well,
anything? Why even bother?
Well, I mean, it's a command, but I mean, if nobody, like look at communist, a bunch of black markets emerged when communism was there. The same thing would happen if you said, "Hey, this is money," and then it was just worth. I mean, it had no backing, it had
Hmm.
no credible, zero credible backing.
Hmm.
People would just be like, "What? No, this is not money. This is just paper that you printed off, on
Yeah.
a machine." Yeah.
Okay. So you've already given me an example of Hayekian money, but just perhaps once again, could you capsulize what the exact requirements are for Hayekian money? So first of all, it's private, right? It's not okay.
It's private. It's issued by a private firm. I mean, the firm could be a for-profit or a non-profit. Doesn't matter. Could be a foundation that
Hmm.
made it. Doesn't
Hmm.
matter. Could be a government agency too. I mean, the government could issue. The Federal Reserve tomorrow could say, "Guess what? We're ending inflation. We're going to become 100% asset reserve currency." That'd be great. That
Hmm.
actually, I think that would be the best possible world to live in. Actually,
Okay.
um, but um, but yeah, that so it's basically just to have 100% asset reserve target and to have some kind of inflation buffered currency. So I don't if someone issued a current they might so I've thought of some people have proposed why don't you follow the I'm going to mispronounce it the Wagrel experiment
Hmm.
where they issued a currency that had a 1% inflation per year.
Okay.
That was its rule, is it just always inflated 1% a year.
Hmm.
Maybe someone could issue a Hayekian currency and say it has a 1% inflation rate. I don't know. It doesn't matter. People could issue all different kinds of sort of rates. You could even say it's slightly deflationary. I mean, you could do anything, right? If it were like a free market,
Hmm.
people could offer all kinds of different currencies with different kind of offerings. And, you know, whatever the market discovered was the best case would prevail.
Are these like the gold-back private banks way back in England with Bank of England, Bank of Scotland coming in and then
It is
issuing private
similar to
credit?
that.
Okay.
Yeah, it is similar to that, except for they tied their currency to a shiny gold colored metal,
Hmm.
which is like, why? Why would you, you know, it's a little bit unsophisticated. I mean, at the time, it was a good prevention of government power, right? So the governments would have liked to just print money
Hmm.
and, have wars and, kings would just like print money to, to pay themselves and buy things for themselves, and it would destroy the economy by printing money.
Right.
And so gold was a good way to actually induce like a monetary discipline,
Hmm.
or not induce, but lay a monetary discipline onto agents in the market or in the economy and in the government who would have liked to be ruthless and break those.
Okay.
So it was a good way to do things back then, but now it's like, well, we could do much more sophisticated things.
Right. So is it
Yeah.
because I mean, printing money is bad, but like, if you can get, it does not print wealth as well. Like the things you actually want, it doesn't really
Yeah.
do that. So you're
Well,
playing a game.
this is the thing. I feel like a lot of people don't give fiat currencies the credit that they're due.
Okay.
So I really believe. So I mean, I've read Keynes, theory of employment, theory of employment, money, and whatever, interest in money.
Yeah.
Great book. One of the greatest books I think ever written. I urge everyone to read it and to really understand Keynes. I think he's arguably one of the greatest, economists. I mean, that's not surprising to say, but I think he really is one of the greatest economists ever to live. And what he realized, probably from looking at the Germans, at the Nazis, because the Nazis were the first to do this, is he realized that you could do this kind of magical machine
Hmm.
where you print money, spend that money in highly productive ways
Hmm.
that increase productive power, real productive power, so wealth, like you're saying,
Hmm.
and then have that increase in productive power be so great that it kind of pays for the inflation of
Hmm.
printing the money.
Right.
And that was a genius and courageous thing to discover and to explain to people and have other people understand it and then actually do it. And then we've seen, pretty much almost uninterrupted prosperity from 1934 when he discovered it all the way to 2000, or 1985, 1990. We started to see more, stagflation and economic crises and polarization of wealth, kind of these bad things. But if you look from the 30s to the 80s,
Yeah.
that's pretty much a half century of uninterrupted wealth creation due to this system. So I'm not saying that fiat currencies and inflationary monetary management by central banks is unequivocally bad. I believe that it's just it worked in a certain expansionary period of capitalism,
Hmm.
and now that expansionary period is really over, and now we're doing much more kind of information based and sort of efficiency based, cost based profit gains by reducing costs, right?
Hmm.
I think that is when it stopped working, and we started to see stagflation and bubbles and sort of financialization, which are all very negative social and just culturally and socially really negative things to
Yeah.
have in the world. So Hayekian currencies, I think, have a moment right now, and I think that's why cryptocurrencies came out. Is people, the kind of the zeitgeist was kind of looking for a way out of this financialization through inflationary money, centralized money supplies, and
Yeah.
they found this weird Satoshi crypto thing, and it was like, oh my god, we got to do this, right? Like the zeitgeist really saw it as this, we got to do this,
Hmm.
but it was actually the wrong tool for the job. And actually, Hayek's paper and book written 30 years before in 72 was actually the thing that I wish the zeitgeist had sort of grabbed onto and used instead.
In my mind, I'd make a distinction between Bitcoin, which I think is pretty decentralized, and other cryptos, which are kind of controlled by some foundation or the other. Do you make that distinction? Is that a valuable distinction to you?
No, it is a distinction, right? Centralization, decentralization. It's
Hmm.
it's a real thing. Ripple is
Right.
not decentralized. It's owned. They printed all the currency before, and they own all of it, and then they manage it centrally.
Hmm.
USDC, Tether, all these are all centrally managed currencies.
Hmm.
Any kind of claim that there's, sort of like, oh, crypto decentralized is false, just
Right.
false.
Right.
Bitcoin, you're right. Yeah, it's decentralized. Ethereum is very decentralized. Um, but when we said that list of what makes a good money, their centralization or decentralization was not on that list.
Hmm.
Like, it doesn't matter if a currency is centralized or decentralized, really. What matters is that you have trust in the system that it
Hmm.
that it works. And obviously with Bitcoin, all you have to really trust is like math,
Yeah.
right? That
Yeah.
but
And proof
but
of
I
work.
think
So yeah.
yeah, proof of work, yeah. That the computers are out there doing their job.
Yeah.
But I think there's other ways to make a currency that you can trust without doing that. I mean, there's currencies that are very trustworthy.
Hmm.
Like the US dollar is actually pretty trustworthy. I mean,
Hmm.
especially up until about, 90, 2000, basically the year 2000, 2000s and on,
Hmm.
it's kind of been less trustworthy, I think. But up to the 2000s, I mean, from Bretton Woods, 1948 to, or 45 to, 9/11, basically the invasion of Iraq, people were like, the dollar is awesome.
Right.
The dollar is trustworthy.
Yeah.
And so you don't need to have it be based on cryptographic math in order to be trustworthy. You just need to make sure it is trustworthy in terms of how it's structured and how it's, governed.
Okay. You described a particular purpose, which is like today's economy, and you said, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, your mouth, but I think what you said is the cryptocurrencies are not fit for purpose, but Hayekian currencies are.
Yeah,
And why
that's
is
my
that?
thing.
What's the distinction?
Yeah, so cryptocurrencies are problematic because so there's the non-stable coins and then there's the stable coins, right? So the non-stable coins are problematic because their value just goes all over the place.
Hmm.
And when you have a volatile value, you're just going to be a volatile commodity, which means you're a high risk commodity. And this is exactly what all the trading data has shown, is that it goes up and down with other volatile, high risk assets, commodities.
Yeah.
So you're not actually creating a currency. All you created is like really, really expensive baseball cards that stock traders like to trade. It's not a money. No one buys milk with it. No
Hmm.
one gets paid in it. I mean, they do. You see, oh, he gets paid in it. I mean, he doesn't really.
Hmm.
It's just for PR, right? And then you have stable coins, which stable coins are cool. First of all, they're all centrally managed, so they don't need to be cryptocurrencies.
Yeah. Yeah.
They could just be closed loop
Yeah.
services where people bought and sold, and the central agency validated all transactions, and it would
Yeah.
work exactly the same. So that's no innovation at all. To be cryptographic actually just adds a bunch of annoying layers of complexity that you don't need.
Yeah.
And then they're all tied to fiat current. They're all tied to national fiats, which means they're all inflating
Hmm.
as badly as the fiat and are just less trustworthy because they're just another layer that could go wrong. Like,
Right.
why not just have a bank account with like a high interest savings loan rate or whatever, so I think a lot of the cryptocurrencies they're responding to this urge to get away from and solve the problems of
Hmm.
national centralized inflationary fiats.
Right.
But it's like you reached in the dark for the right tool and you wanted like a hammer and you grabbed a toothbrush and you were like, ha, I got it's the wrong one. It's just the
Hmm.
wrong tool for the job. The Hayekian currency is the hammer that you meant to grab, in the dark there as you're kind of flailing around looking for a solution to this problem.
Okay. And then why is a gold standard, going back to a gold standard or a gold backed paper standard or a Bitcoin standard, if you're into that, why is that not better than Hayekian currencies, private currencies?
Well, I mean, but it's the same problem of volatility. Gold also has a volatile price. I mean, it went up like 200% in like the past 4 years. It's
Right.
crazy. I mean, that you can't pay someone a salary in gold and then 2 years later you're paying them three times, two and a half times as much.
Yeah.
You didn't give them a raise. You didn't decide, you didn't decide as the employer to do that. So
Hmm.
your accounting, this is the problem. This is the real underlying issue. Remember how I said unit of account?
Hmm.
That's one of the roles of money. It actually, Hayek goes into detail in denationalization about this. The unit of account value of money is the most important role of money for the money to be broadly used.
Okay.
And the most important thing for the unit of account value is to have a stable, which means a predictable value.
Hmm. Hmm.
So gold, it's somewhat predictable. People know it's going to go up slowly, and it's going to kind of go up, might go down. But in Bitcoin is not predictable at all. You couldn't do your accounting in Bitcoin; it'd be crazy. Your books
Hmm.
would be insane
Hmm.
to try to do that. So a Hayekian currency allows you, because it's centrally managed and because it's managed uh similar to fiat. I can kind of explain how it works, but
Sure.
you can just declare its value. I
Hmm.
mean, you can just centrally say what its value is.
Hmm.
It's peg, I call it. So what it's pegged to, and then it will just stay that value. And so you can create an extremely predictable and stable value of a currency, which makes it the superior unit of account currency, which means, according to Hayek's belief, and I think he's right, will make it the most popular currency to use. It will push out more volatile currencies because it will be a superior unit of account.
Okay. So theoretically, you could denominate things in ounces of gold or satoshis. Now, and forget about the dollar conversion. So the volatility in that way goes away. But then I guess the issue there is with the saleability across, like it's going to be
But
have
but
heavy transaction cost.
the volatility won't go away.
Oh, one. Okay.
This is a fallacy. Yeah. So if I say I'll buy, let's say we're talking about gold, just to keep
Yeah.
Bitcoin out of it, just to not trigger people. I know people are really committed to Bitcoin. I have empathy and compassion for people who've really gotten into Bitcoin. But let's use gold to not get in emotions involved. So say I'm like buying and selling things in gold, like we have a gold economy or even a gold bond economy where the bonds are redeemable in gold.
Yeah.
If we have that economy and I buy potatoes with gold, and then tomorrow the value of gold doubles because there's a war and the king buys a ton of gold to pay the soldiers,
Hmm.
the price of potatoes deflates by 2x.
Right.
It goes from the price of potatoes costing one, shekel of gold to half a shekel of gold if the
Hmm.
value doubled, right? And that means that's deflation. That will crush a modern economy. It would hurt a non-modern economy to have massive 50% deflation overnight. It would absolutely wreck a modern economy because all the debt would be in crisis if there was 50% deflation in one day, which
Hmm.
there very well could be. Bitcoin, I mean, the biggest drops in Bitcoin have been, and raises in Bitcoin have been in that field, right, in that area. So yeah, it's not. So if you denominate everything in something, that does not mean you eliminate volatility. It just means you push volatility onto prices.
Hmm.
Prices will move. And that is the movement of the value of the money. That's why inflation is the loss of the value of the money. Deflation is the increase of the value of the money.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
In this respect, though, you said it's going to be backed by assets.
Yeah.
This now, what are these assets?
So the assets that we decided to back the Numi with, and
Hmm.
again, in a kind of market of these monies. So if there's various Hayekian currencies that started, they could all try different assets and different pegs.
Hmm.
We peg to the CPI,
Hmm.
which is not optimal. I think we could do better than that, but that's kind of the most ready at hand thing to peg to for inflation. And then our assets are 50% total market index funds and 50% tips to inflation proof federal bonds. That would probably change, especially if hacking currencies started to really pick up speed. The bond market would probably shift.
Yeah.
Tips might not even be reliable anymore. So we probably wouldn't stay 50% tips, 50% um total market ETFs. We'd probably roll into other types of bonds, corporate bonds or municipal bonds or whatever. That would
Right.
be more stable.
Okay. And any other, so are you focused on scarce assets or just assets that are just have high value?
The trick is to pick assets that are tied to inflation.
Right.
So the best thing you could hold would be, a silo full of grain and a bunch of, cars. And, if you could actually hold the assets that people were about to buy,
Right.
that would be the ideal backing for a currency, because then you could just, that would literally be just moving one side of the ledger to the other.
Hmm.
But instead you have to have there's some distance, because the financial paper that you can buy, stocks or bonds or whatever, is always going to have some proxy relationship to consumer prices.
Right.
So what you want to do is develop a backing that has a strong either correlative connection to the
Hmm.
to inflation, or a causal. You might find kind of causal relationships, like to between those assets you could hold as the backing and for consumer prices.
Is there an ideal inflation percentage number that you have? Like, is it zero or is it deflationary?
So this is the problem with this question. This is a great question. This is, I think, in some ways, the fundamental question, and it's why this is why people are like caught inside of a paper bag with this. There's two ways to think of this question. I'm going to make a distinction, a
Hmm.
black and white distinction. One of those, one side of this question is, what do I, as a guy who is a plumber and makes $150,000 a year with my plumbing business, what's the ideal inflation rate for me?
Hmm.
Right? Because economy, it's always about whose economy,
Yeah.
right? Whose economy, not the economy. There is no the economy. There's
Right.
different people and different firms' economies. So who wants a 0% inflation rate? What inflation rate does the central bank with their connections to the federal government want? Well, and those guys are backed by, huge corporations. What do they want?
Hmm.
What do huge employers want? Well, guess what? They want higher inflation because if you high inflation for those people, for those economies, means they pay their workers less next year because
Hmm.
the inflation gets, cuts away the wages, the real value of the wages. The government pays less in national debt, right? Because the higher the inflation is, that lowers the real value of the national debt,
Right.
right? And the central bank, I mean, if they have to do inflation, that means they're cutting rates. Everybody's patting them on the back. Everybody's telling them they're doing a great job.
Hmm.
If they lower rates, everyone's like, you guys are jerks. You're killing the economy, right? So there's a huge incentive for this powerful, centrally run corporatist federal, economy to be, and Wall Street, to be lowering rates, which means have inflationary effects.
Hmm.
And they don't care. These people don't care about inflation. It doesn't bother their economy. If you're wealthy, if you have $1 million, most of your money is tied up in your house, a real asset. Doesn't really inflate because inflation makes the value of the house go up.
Hmm.
So you're protected from inflation,
Hmm.
and you have a lot of money in stocks and bonds because you keep your whole retirement and everything all in stocks and bonds, which also go up, beat inflation. So you're only affected by like your wage. So if you're super rich and you make all your money from the value of assets, you have inflation doesn't matter at all, except for that you have to pay your workers, which
Hmm.
means inflation is going to lower that cost,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So the very wealthy, the very centrally located firms, in the centers of the banks, the centers of the government, the centers of corporations, they love inflation. They want inflation. They don't care because it's
Right.
their economy versus our economy. So if you make a currency that has a 0% inflation rate, people will say that's going to wreck the economy. And it's like, no, it's going to wreck the economy of crazy, millionaires and central governments,
Hmm.
which I don't really care about their economy, but it's going to help the economy of the workers who they don't get a pay cut every year. And Joe Blow, who wants to save money for whatever he wants to buy,
Yeah.
he can save money and it's not going to be eaten away every year by the rising in prices.
Yeah.
So I think it comes down to, I'm not saying that this would, I don't know what the macroeconomic effects would this be. I mean, to say I did would be the height of eh, false confidence and arrogance. And for anyone to say they
Hmm.
know exactly what the macroeconomic effects would be of Hayekian currencies dominating the monetary supply, they could not know. No one could know.
Hmm.
But what I do know is that people every day, there's a lot of people who are hurt by inflation, and, that's why it's an issue for the election coming up. Inflation. People hate inflation. It really matters to them every
Yeah.
day. That's why it's a political issue. And so I think it's worthy to at least experiment with trying to create a currency that has no inflation, and give that to the people who want it.
Could you just okay? There is a distinction sometimes in these circles in monetary inflation and just inflation because, the price of eggs are going up.
Sure.
Because
Yes.
what's the
Yes.
distinction?
Yes, this is a good definitional question. So yeah, so on the one hand, you have monetary inflation, which is, total number of goods and services divided by the amount of money. If you raise the denominator, then that changes the prices that people will post for the goods and services.
Yeah.
There's sort of this simple equation you can think of. Whereas if you do a supply shock or a demand shock, you'll also alter prices. If tomorrow we make the Star Trek replicator and
Mm.
everything's easy to make, then all the prices will go down.
Yeah.
Is that deflation?
Mm.
Yeah, well, yes, but it's not monetary deflation. It's
Yeah. It's a good
supply side
deflation.
deflation. Yeah, it's a good deflation. It's like how TVs have gotten super cheap.
Yeah.
We've seen consistent deflation in technology, cell phones and TVs for 20 years, 30 years. We've seen consistent massive inflation in, healthcare, higher education, housing,
Important stuff.
very important stuff, right? You can get a flat screen TV though, better than,
Yeah.
cheaper than ever.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's the difference between monetary and, what would be called real or like supply demand shock,
Okay.
inflation, deflation.
I have this visual in my mind, more like a movie, where you are going from Keynesian currencies to Hayekian currencies. Now,
It's a
and
boring movie. That is one boring movie.
well, there are two rap videos on Hayek versus
That's
Keynes.
true. That's so
Yeah,
good.
yeah,
Yes.
those are nice. But
Yes.
like for
Yeah.
our audiences, can you explain the tussle between Keynes's view and Hayek's view, just about economy and currencies and
Yeah.
everything?
Yes. So I'll preface this by saying I actually think Keynes would have changed his mind to be more like Hayek today
Okay.
than he did,
Mm.
because they were at odds when they were alive. But, Keynes was famous for changing his mind. So he had a famous quote where someone called him out for having changed from being a classical economist, very kind of free market, laissez faire classical economist, to becoming a Keynesian economist, someone who's willing to do government intervention and, government, stuff. And he said, "Sir, when the facts change, so do my opinions."
Mhm.
And he was looking at World War, basically the rise of, what the Nazis were able to do with the Wirtschaftswunder, the economic miracle of Germany.
Yeah.
And he said that's an economic fact that
Mm.
that Germany turned from a bombed out crap hole after World War One to fighting a multi-front war against all the most advanced countries in the world in
Yeah.
10 years. What happened there,
Mm.
I think what he saw that would happen there is the Nazis started publishing fiat currency. The Nazis created what were called Laborschein, which just means labor certificate. And if you like worked for the party, you got these labor shines. And if stores didn't accept them, then the brown shirts showed up to your store the next day and said, "You better accept the damn labor shines." Right? It was like
Yeah.
a fiat currency, and their anti-Semitism was tied to gold-backed currencies. So they
Right.
were able to liberate or remove the tie between the Deutschmark and the gold
Mm.
through anti-Semitism to say,
Mm.
well, if you want us to have a gold-backed currency, you're just whatever, you're a Semitic person, and we were anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot I think, tied into the Nazis, not to condemn. Actually, that's the cool thing about Keynes. He didn't condemn it. He learned from, even though they were evil, he learned from what they were doing and created a kind of similar system in Keynesianism. But anyways, I'm going way off the mark from what your question was, though. Your question was, what's the difference between Keynesian and Hayekian economics? I mean, I think there's a kind of cartoonish sort of difference, which I don't actually like, because I like to try to keep things more on a nuanced, sort of subtle and sort of honest level. But the cartoonish difference is like Keynesianism is you can have like technocrats who are centrally located in the economy, making sort of large decisions about everybody and kind of top down. And they print money and they do these big programs, spending money to kind of control things. And Hayekian is more like, bottom up, like we should trust entrepreneurs and like consumers to like essentially vote with their dollars and vote with their startups to like make things and discover what would be best. And you shouldn't like do big, central changes. You should like keep things very predictable and sort of boring at the top level and
Mm.
have all the sort of excitement come up from the bottom. But I think those are like, like I said, it's kind of a cartoonish. I think it's much, the reality is you have to have a balance and interplay institutionally between those forces.
Okay. Let me just try and think this question. I
I
think
answer your questions way too long, by the way.
no, no,
I
no.
know,
That's
I know that I'm doing that, and I'm sorry. I give
no,
way too long. I'm gonna try to give you like a one word. Okay, let's do a one word answer.
that
Let's
would be
see.
a boring podcast. Don't do that.
Okay,
All right.
okay.
I'm thinking if a country is not particularly rights respecting, and to me, rights are only individual rights, life, liberty, property. So that's one. Or and if it's in a massive problem like a war. Or third is if it's playing catch up. like the developing world playing catch up to the developed world. That the Keynesian model might work. But when once you are in the developed world, then you are, and of course, I don't like that term developed world because it says there is no further going. Both of us are in the progress
Right.
studies environment.
Right.
I'm also in the EAC environment. I mean,
Right.
I want to
Right.
like make sure we can harness the whole universe somehow. That
Right.
requires new ideas, and those valuations are done by individuals. So I don't know if technocrats can basically evaluate things and decide what's productive and what's not productive on our behalf. So
Right.
is Hayek more susceptible to this kind of 0 to 1 inventions and maybe Keynes for
Yes.
playing catch up?
Yeah, I mean, yes. The answer is yes. There's no
Okay.
one word answer. You are
Okay.
right. Okay, I think maybe if I add more words to that answer, I'd say that Hayek definitely is a kind of bubble up from the bottom. He has an amazing essay that if you haven't read Hayek's like there's like four essays that are like the absolute some of the best, not just best economic writing. They're arguably some of the most interesting essays ever written
Hmm.
in at least he wrote them in German, but the best essays I've ever some of the best essays I've ever read, and one of those is the market as a discovery procedure or
Hmm.
competition as a discovery procedure. And if you haven't read that, everyone, I mean, it should just be like baseline reading for everyone who's alive
Hmm.
because it really shows how the way we learn, the way we discover even what we want in
Hmm.
the world is by trying and offering to each other various goods and services and seeing, does that work, does that work, does that work? And
Yeah.
if you don't engage in that, it's not just that you'll not hit the mark, you won't even know what the mark is, you
Hmm.
won't even know where you should aim.
Yeah.
So there has to be some competition in order just to discover what we might want.
Right.
I think
Right.
that's a pretty compelling argument.
Yeah. Okay. What are legal tender laws in this
Oh
respect?
God, league or tender. Everyone gets this wrong too. Man, you're just going through like the YouTube comments or like the comments that I get whenever I post about Hayekian currencies. People just do this whole thing. Well, inflation, a little bit of inflation is good. Oh, I have
Uh,
to explain. There's different economies, different inflation levels help different firms and hurt
yeah.
other firms.
Whose economy?
Whose economy? Or they say exactly this. Well, it's not legal tender. I had a guy going off on legal tender. Let me explain what legal tender is. All legal tender is, all it is just a designation that the government makes
Hmm.
for what type of money, because there's many types, and hundreds of years ago there was many types of money. The government had to say what monies does the government accept? That's all it means. It's just a sign in the government that says this money accepted here. And whatever money they put in there, that is legal tender. That's all
Right.
it means. It does
Right.
not mean that the government makes all other monies illegal. That's crazy.
Hmm.
Has nothing to do with what
Okay.
the term legal tender means. Yeah.
All right.
So it just means that the government wants you to pay taxes in US dollars. And if a court orders you to pay a fine, it's going to order you to pay it in US dollars because US dollars are legal tender. That's all it means.
So the government is not going to come and shut down your project or
No,
okay.
no, no.
Okay.
It is totally legal to start a new currency. There are many examples. The Ithaca hours, all the cryptocurrencies, they weren't shut down. They're currencies. The Ithaca hours, the Berkshire bucks. There's, you could even say like, when you buy a gift card to Best Buy, it's
Yeah.
basically Best Buy bucks.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's airline flight points. There's credit card points. These are
Right.
all tokens of value. And, people say, well, they're not convertible. There's kind of ways that people distinguish it from a full currency, but there is nothing legally blocking you from starting a currency, as the cryptocurrencies illustrate.
Yeah, I can imagine if I accrue a lot of American Express points, changing them into US dollars and paying the taxes that way as well. I mean, that is a
Yeah.
possibility. Okay.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, you could. I mean, it's not totally convertible, right? So it's not
Mhm.
bidirectional
Yeah.
convertible,
Yeah.
but it's still a tokenized form of value.
Okay. But much more
So
limited. It's not going to be across time and
yeah,
space here.
yeah. But cryptocurrencies are widely you can go both ways. And you can open Coinbase and there are thousands of currencies you can buy
Yeah.
and sell.
Yeah. I
So
think
it's not
4,000
illegal.
last I checked.
Yeah, so it's not illegal to start a new currency. That means that cryptocurrencies would have been completely illegal.
Right. So
So
apart from Bitcoin, your gripe with regular crypto is you don't need the whole crypto angle because it's anyway centralized.
yeah.
So why are you wasting
Yeah,
energy
why are
or
you
just your
wasting
energy?
yeah, yeah, why are you wasting time and energy
Yeah.
and it's complicated and turns a lot of people off.
Yeah.
to it, whereas if you just eliminated all that and you just had closed loop currencies, it'd be as easy as signing up for his Venmo.
Yeah. Okay. In this ecology of yours, if you can project, let's say, 10 years into the future and there is a network effect, people sign up, are you anticipating competitors? And then
I
if
hope
you are,
so.
you are, okay,
Yes.
okay.
Let's have
So
competitors.
let's,
I think actually we should get competitors sooner rather than later. Like actually, if someone else wants to start a competitor to the Numi, I
hmm,
think we should work together, like co-opetition. We
okay,
should sort of cooperate while competing
right.
in
But
order to
be careful
build the
with that,
space. In
with
order
the
to build
whole,
the space,
yeah,
because it's not about us. It's not about one currency against the other,
hmm,
Hayekian currency against the other. It's about the Hayekian currencies all working against the bigger currencies.
right. But you don't suggest any kind of price fixing or cartelization, right? It's just an association.
No, no, no,
Okay,
yeah, yeah.
just to be
Not
clear.
even, yeah. I mean, no, no, of course. The whole point is to compete on price,
Yeah, yeah,
so that we all are offering interesting, cool things. There'd probably be a lot of market segmentation,
hmm,
just what you see. There'd be a lot of segmentation. There'd be a lot of interesting stuff. Some people would be crypto based because whatever they can be if they want to be. It's
yeah.
just technology, but you
Okay,
don't have to be.
all right. Essentially, your method is start a currency.
Yeah, start a currency.
All right.
Yeah, I'm really open. I mean, I'm open to all kinds of things. I'd be interested in people starting a competitor. I'd be open to people helping build Numi. I'd be open to someone buying Numi and just kicking me out because they think they can do it better than me. I don't
Hmm,
really care because I think anything that could advance, I would keep working to advance the idea because I think it's good for the world.
hmm.
But yeah, I'm very open to kind of working with people in all different ways.
Okay. In the last section, a few rapid fire questions, and you can take your time to answer, but I'm going to try and rapid fire them.
I'll try to rapid fire too.
How does a for-profit setup in Hayekian currencies make money? Is there any seniorage over there?
Yeah, so you could do sort of well, there's no inflation, so there's no seniorage, but you could do at some point your reserve is going to outpace inflation over the long run.
Hmm,
So I think over the long run you could start doing what I might call reserve harvesting, like reserve surplus harvesting,
right.
right? I mean, if you have 150% asset reserve, you don't need that. You could
Yeah.
you could pay yourself 10 or 20% of that
Right.
and still have 120%, 130%. You'd be totally ready for any kind of rainy day.
Hmm,
And even within 10 years, you'd easily have that much. So I think you could start to kind of have gains from the reserve could be very carefully and very measuredly taken as revenue. And then you have fees. So that's the main way up front is you have fees. You have vendor fees, just
hmm,
like PayPal, Venmo. If you're a vendor, you pay a fee. Now the fees that you pay for PayPal or for credit cards or debit cards is 2.3% and 30 cents. It's insane. It's highway robbery.
hmm,
This could be, I was thinking do 5 times less than that because 5 times is a good number.
hmm,
So I was thinking it would be, 0.5% and 5 cents per
hmm.
transaction charged
Yeah.
only to vendors. So personal peer-to-peer free, and and the consumer doesn't pay anything. It's just if you want to open a store and do payments via that instead of a business wallet, then you would pay a small fee, way smaller than credit cards and debit cards.
Right. Let's do some future projection and try and make the sensory rich. I'm also a coach, so I'm going to get that environment in me as well. I have your money, and I want to go to, I don't know, Domino's, Chick-fil-A. I want to go to Chick-fil-A,
Right.
and they
Mm-hmm.
are not accepting your money, but they're accepting some of the competitors' money, and I guess they're also accepting gold and fiat. Now, what
Yeah.
do I do? Do I need to indulge in multiple conversions between different money, like I'm doing
Yeah.
forex trading?
So no, no, it'll be all extremely simplified. So imagine you fly to Europe tomorrow.
Hmm.
What do? You just swipe your credit card.
I use Vice,
All,
but
but
yeah.
all the vendors get euros and it takes dollars out of your account. You don't think about it for even a second. You just think, oh yeah, euros 80 cents to the dollar. Okay, everything's 20% off. Okay, in your mind. And then you just go easy, 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 easy. No
Okay.
problem.
Okay.
There's no cognitive load here for people. Numi will definitely have debit cards that you can just swipe anywhere and
Right.
it'll pay dollars or pay whatever and take out the Numi.
So it's not free floating, it is pegged and it has a fixed rate to the dollar as well.
It's pegged to the CPI. So
Yeah,
if the interest this month is 0.5%, then the Numi goes up 0.5%.
right. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So okay, that's easy. And what about the networks? Would you be on Visa and MasterCard as well? Somehow Amex as well?
Well, the goal would be to actually compete with those.
Hmm.
So be on the side of those and be more like Weibo in China,
Okay.
or WePay, where you can just walk up and there's a QR code
QR
and you just
code.
scan their card and say $20 in good, and then they give you $20 worth of goods.
Oh, like UPI in India. Right. I mean,
Yeah,
they
like
have the
UPI
same
in
thing.
India.
Yeah.
Yep, they launched that a few years ago, and they're just launched the same thing in, I think, Mexico's launching a similar thing. This
Right.
is the future of, I mean, Visa and MasterCard are
Gone.
trash and they are horrible. I mean, they're just monopolists who've just been blood sucking, vampirically sucking value out of the American economy for 20 years. We could have rebuilt our payment system easily 20
Yeah.
years ago on internet with QR codes, or just, whatever cards that you swipe, but it just sent an internet signal to an
Yeah.
API. We could have done that decades ago. We
Yeah.
just haven't, because the cartel of this duopoly has blocked it all with their political clout and their technological and antitrust. I mean, that's why we're seeing Visa get sued for antitrust. They're horrible. I mean, it's just egregious antitrust violators. And so that all should have been destroyed years ago.
Just from a user experience point of view, I think my favorite way to pay is either tapping a card if the amount is less than $50 and then chip and pin if it's more than $50. If
Sure.
I need to scan in India or like you do it with Zelle as well, there's a
Yeah,
lot of steps involved. It's not
totally.
frictionless. So would you have debit cards? I mean, debit card option is going to be
Sure.
available. Okay, all right.
I mean, we could invent custom hardware. I mean, this is not a business that lacks money.
Hmm.
this this is a business that could say, yeah, buy our little fob,
Right.
and now you can pay with the little fob and tap your phone on it. Like, why do we need cards? All that is completely retrograde. And it's all because Visa and MasterCard are just antitrust psychos. They're
Hmm.
psychos.
Hmm.
They're crazy. The fact that Apple Pay didn't already do all this is only an indication of the fact that Visa and MasterCard and Amex are just have a stranglehold
Right.
on payments. Apple would have already blown this all up if they could. I mean, if they would have been allowed to when they
Hmm.
made Apple Pay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Allowed
Yeah.
to. By whom? By
By Amex, by the cartel of these payments companies,
but I'm assuming there
Mastercard,
is
Visa, and Amex.
the cartel in itself doesn't have any force. It's appealing to government force as well, right? In order to do the
Well,
enforcement on their behalf.
they have power too, because
Hmm.
they can say, hey, if anybody starts working with Apple, guess what? All your payment fees are doubling tomorrow.
Ah, okay, okay,
I mean,
okay,
they
okay.
can do all kinds of shisty stuff behind the scenes, and they have government power.
Hmm.
I'm pretty sure the way that, I mean, I'm just speculating, but I'm pretty sure Apple called them and said, "Hey, we want to do the iTunes of payments, right? We want to be cut in on the
Hmm.
payment fee, and we'll work with you if you cut us in. If you don't work with us, we'll launch our own payment system."
Hmm.
And they were like, "This makes perfect sense. Let's just cut Apple into the cartel for a small fee, and now Apple makes billions, and we continue to be a dominant market force." But if a startup could just start this, then a startup would just, they wouldn't pick up the phone. They wouldn't
Hmm.
even pick up the phone to the startup calling, and they
Yeah.
would actually just upgrade the entire payment system.
What do you make of Fed now? It is like UPI, but not for like customers. So is
You
that
know,
it's like Zelle as well. So I don't see the point. But like, what do you make of it?
yeah, Fed now is just, it's
Okay.
like, I mean, sure, yes, all of this should have been done decades ago.
Right.
The fact that it hasn't been done is indicative of how just cartelized and necrotic and ossified
Hmm.
this part of our economy is. The payments, it's just blood sucking vampiric capitalism, just
Yeah.
trying to constantly extract value. The Federal Reserve has a profit of about 40 to 80 billion dollars a year of profit, that they then, by law, they return that to the federal government. So the federal government just gets that as revenue, as
Hmm.
like a tax from the, but that means that every year the Federal Reserve, who is in charge of payments, they regulate all payments. They could have just held back like $2 or $3 billion a year for like 3 or 4 or 5 years and
Hmm.
spend all that money upgrading the whole payment system. That
Yeah.
could have been like, scan your, I mean, you don't want, people are scared of like the bio scanning, but I'm just saying, like, hypothetically, it could be like retinal scanners on every payment kiosk. Like, there's the money is there to do this,
Yeah.
and the technology's there. There's literally just this cartelized, ossified, vampiric corporations that just don't want to give up drinking up everyone's profit for providing no value. I mean,
Hmm.
no value. I mean, they used to provide value. In the 60s when they invented credit cards, there was no internet. So the payment system with cards was actually very sophisticated. And they
Yeah.
they really had to pay to run the wire and run everything around the world to connect so that you could tap, swipe your card and it would pay all the way across the world. That's amazing. But in the last 20 years, since the internet wired up the whole world with fiber optic cables,
Hmm.
you don't need this old system anymore. You can just wipe it off the face of the earth.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
I'm gonna have like people rappel through the windows and kill me for saying this, but it's true. It's just true. I can't, have to say the truth.
I want to do two quick shallow dives over here. Can you distinguish between rentier or let's say rent-seeking capitalism versus what I think is actual capitalism, where value is
Yes,
created and value for value is the case?
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think any red-blooded capitalist like myself, who believes in free markets and entrepreneurism, should be an absolute enemy of rent seeking.
Hmm.
I think rent seeking is just the enemy
Hmm.
for people like that.
And progress.
Yeah, progress. I mean,
Hmm.
people who are just sitting around doing nothing, contributing nothing, and then just doing financial engineering or regulatory capture so that money just like flows into their bank account for doing nothing, for providing no innovation, no managerial, expertise, no scientific expertise, no technological anything. That's just a waste. That's just like a totally horrible thing. And
Hmm.
and we should be rooting out rent seeking and eliminating it. Um, I think,
Okay.
you know.
And
But
do
productive
you,
capitalism is, innovation and starting new companies and like This is people love to rag on Elon Musk, but honestly, look at Elon Musk and compare him to the other 1,000 billionaires that you don't know their name.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
those other 1,000 billionaires, most of them inherited their money, so they
yeah.
provided zero value,
Hmm.
and then they do mostly financial engineering to get their billions. They just set up, some scheme so that they end up making billions of dollars. Doesn't provide any. It could have been just set up some other way so that that money was just distributed to the people involved.
Right.
So Elon Musk is an example of a value creating capitalist. And
Hmm.
honestly, he shouldn't be like the poster child of like the bad capitalism. He should be the poster child of good capitalism because he actually creates these amazing companies and innovates and pushes the limits on everything. He does stupid things too, but I mean, you can't be right
Yeah,
100% of the time. He does amazing things. You go land rockets, and then let me criticize you about other things you do.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
like you
The
landed
package deal.
rockets. Yeah. But yeah, so yeah, that's a good question though. I think that's an interesting differentiation to make. That certainly, yeah, it was good.
In the okay, so there's separation of church and state, definition of secularism. Do you think there should be a separation of economy slash money and state, and that's the ideal state?
Well, there is. I mean, to some extent. Oh, well, you can't really separate government from financial stuff. I mean, you have to regulate the economy. You have to do you have to put soldiers on the road to make the market day work, right? On Sunday, if you have markets on Sunday, you don't put soldiers on the road, everyone will get robbed on the roads to the market won't work. So you need government to sort of create, the rules and to
How
create
much?
safety and stuff. How much government?
Hmm.
I don't know. I think it depends on the circumstances. Americans are quite criminal, actually. Almost all Americans are way criminal people generally. So you have to put more, maybe. But Europeans are very law abiding. So you probably need less in Europe, ironically, because they have more. But yeah, I mean, I don't think you can say, one way or the other. It's not like, oh, good big government bad, small government good. It's good government good, bad government bad, right?
Okay, okay.
And you have to make a case by case analysis. So for example, when Keynes said, let's make fiat currencies in 1930s whatever, 5 or whatever, when he wrote the his book, he was right, even though it was saying more government.
Hmm.
But if today you tell me I'm a Keynesian and I think we should like print money and bail out the banks and run wars all over all the world by printing money, I'd say you're wrong. In this case, government bad. Like that's
Right.
Keynesianism now is the wrong tool for the job. It's the wrong thing. So it's dependent on the context, I think.
Okay, finally. Is this going to be a winner take all situation where one currency wins out, or are we still going to have some biodiversity?
Interesting. Yeah, yeah. I think what you'll see is you'll see a kind of a long tail. So
Hmm.
you'll see some big players, like somebody's going to be the Walmart of currency. They're going to give a nice currency that is inflation proof for consumers, and consumers are going to use that.
Hmm.
The dollar will probably stick around because the government probably wants to operate its own currency,
Mm,
like an NPR station on the radio. So the dollar will probably be very powerful forever. It'll always probably be a major currency.
mm,
And then I think you'll see some giant markets have their own specialty currencies. Like I wouldn't be surprised to see like an oil currency
mm.
emerge. That then all the oil markets of the world would use that one oil currency that was pegged to the kind of cost signature of oil people involved in oil, firms involved in oil. So that would become like the oil currency of the world
Right.
because it'd be the best currency to do your unit of your unit of account to do your accounting in. So you would see these kind of major currencies emerge around certain sort of cost functions. The primary one being consumer cost function, which would be the CPI. That'd be the main one, right? That'd be the sort of the biggest currency. But then you'd see all these other ones around other kind of cost functions, and then you'd see also among all those currencies, especially the consumer ones, you'd see some differentiation in offerings.
Mm,
So, for example, I could make tomorrow, and anyone could start this. You could make a Hayekian currency that was conflict and fossil fuel free,
mm, mhm.
right? You could say our assets do not include any. It could be like an ESG currency, and some people who were motivated to have that maybe it would have a 1% inflation every year because you couldn't do 0% inflation because maybe you don't get the gains of more evil more immoral assets. So you could offer things like that. You could offer rewards. You could offer, you could do a kind of elite money. I don't know what exactly would distinguish that, but you could sort of make an elite sort of Uber
Yeah.
Amex style money. So yeah, you'll see all kinds of differentiation, but it probably would turn into similar to like the way credit cards are today. Like tons of people have the Amazon credit card, tons of people have the Amex credit card, tons of people have the United mileage plus credit card, but there aren't like a million credit cards. There's only
Mm,
like 100 major. I mean, anyone knows.
yeah.
So I'd say it probably resolves like that.
Okay. I did say last question, but I do have another one.
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah, it's
quickly.
okay.
So
It's okay.
somebody
No
creates like an
rush.
homage to fossil fuel currencies because, I mean, apart from energy, they provide a lot of other things. And this fossil-less currency, or whatever, other currencies here, the conversion is going to be, you're saying, not problematic. It's not going to be a volatile market. It can just keep, all right. Okay.
Well, I mean, they might be volatile to each other, but that's just a reflection of their underlying pegs being
Hmm.
volatile to each other.
Right. Right. Okay.
So yeah, but that doesn't mean price posting. So price posting in the marketplace.
Hmm.
So if I just went to the grocery store, probably the price posting is still going to be in dollars,
Hmm, hmm, hmm.
right?
Right.
But very few people are going to be holding dollars unless the dollar itself became a high-ranking currency,
Right.
which it probably would. I mean, if 10 or 20 or 30% of money became Hayekian, that would force the federal government would have to instruct the central bank, or the central bank would instruct the federal government
Hmm.
that it's becoming a Hayekian currency. Because if it didn't, it would go out of business,
Right.
right? It would be destroyed by the competition.
Okay.
So probably in the long run, the dollar itself will become Hayekian, and it will be the kind of general currency that everybody still uses, unless they completely mismanage it and literally get outcompeted by, you know, someone who does a better job. But probably that I don't think that would happen. I think they would start to smell the roses
Yeah.
as soon as it really became an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We should probably do another episode on just the threat vectors on this because I can see so many. But that's a game
Besides
theory
people
episode.
repelling in, crashing through the window, and like red dots on my forehead, lasers. I think people overestimate that. I think the reason why we haven't done this is not because, men in smoke filled rooms have, you know,
Hmm.
stopped people from doing it. I think the reason we haven't done this is just literally it has to do with history. It has to do with consciousness developing over time. And we just aren't yet, and we're getting there. And the people who are listening to this, you're on the cutting edge because I think this is the cutting edge of money. This is the post crypto world. I'm offering the post crypto solution to the problems that crypto didn't ultimately solve with money. Money still has the problems that it had when Satoshi hit print on the Satoshi paper
Hmm.
because crypto didn't solve it. So this Hayekian currency solutions, this is the post crypto solution, I think, to these same underlying problems.
Okay.
But consciousness needs to expand to do it. I think people need to historically move beyond fiat currencies, which we just haven't done yet. So it's
Yeah.
it's a process.
So how do people get in touch with you in order for the consciousness to
Oh, people
expand?
should definitely get in touch with me, but please don't say the things we already covered on this podcast. Don't say, "Oh, it's not legal tender," or these things. Yeah, but people can get in touch with me. Braus at paywithnewbie.com, or they can go to my website, adambraus.com, where they'll see other things that I do that aren't necessarily related to this, but they can get in touch with me there. Um, yeah, I guess Braus at paywithnewbie.com is probably the best.
Awesome. Perfect. Any
Yeah.
parting thoughts?
Just that this has been awesome, Sagar. Your questions are like really, really spot on, and you obviously know a lot about this, and I'm just like humbled and proud and happy that we're talking about this together. So what a cool experience. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming on. See you, folks.
My pleasure. Take care, everyone.
Bye.